Game 1 in Sacramento last night. And not only did the Kings and De'Aaron Fox show up, but shout out to the Sacramento crowd because they showed up, right? I think we were all expecting this split crowd, and that just wasn't the case, right? Sacramento held it down. Now, Vivek, did he buy some ticket? Like, how did that work? I don't know. I don't want to discredit the Kings fans for showing up, but it seemed oddly like there just weren't that many Warrior fans there. It makes you think what the crowd will look like eventually at the Chase Center in Game 3. But let's talk about this game. It was an epic opening to the playoffs and return to the playoffs for this Kings team. A back and forth event, right, where it came as advertised, right? I think the first thing to talk about was, and I know in my series preview that I was really concerned with Kevin Huerter. And now in hindsight, it makes perfect sense that it would be Malik Monk, the guy that would really hurt this team. You think about a crafty shooter and Huerter with size, or a bouncy, explosive athlete who can get into the paint. You know, that archetype of player tends to give the Warriors more trouble than a Kevin Huerter. And you saw it in the game, 14 of 14 from the foul line. And it is his ability to hang in the air. You know, it's an art form. And there's been so much discussion on why the Warriors don't get whistles, in particular, why Steph doesn't get whistles, right? When you look at the guys that are masters at getting to the line, it's either drawing that contact, right? Like a Luka or a Harden, a Kyle Lowry, right? Where they just get into your body. And then there's the other type, the Ja Morant or a Malik Monk, where it's their hang time and their ability to kind of float in the air. And they just hold on to the ball a split second later, a beat later, until the whistle is blown. And you saw that over and over again with Malik Monk. And he just put pressure, too much pressure on the Warriors defense at the rim. Right? When there's no true rim protector, that green lights him downhill. And so what did he have? Like 31 points, and that Kentucky backcourt really took over the game late. Now let's talk about De'Aaron Fox and what has become maybe inevitable, right? Maybe inevitable. And in my breakdown today, I was doing some Ja Morant comparisons because I think he is the closest matchup that we've seen in recent memory when we talk about a playoff series. Right now, I think Ja is quicker, right? And Ja, obviously, probably the most bounce in the league, pound for pound, his elevation and his ability to hang in the air and draw fouls, right? Fox doesn't have that, but, you know, stride for stride, he covers more ground than Ja. And so downhill, he gets to his spots. He's faster in the open court, again, because of his stride. But I think the separator and the difference is, listen, I don't know if, I can't concretely say this, but he might be better than Ja, or he might be a tougher matchup than Ja in the sense of it's the jumper. And they're both, you know, not considered shooters, but I think Fox, who has a little more experience than Ja, he's better at finding his rhythm. And I thought that was the issue in the second half last night defensively. Look, it's a predicament. I understand it. You got to give him and Monk, you got to give them space, right? Because they're so explosive off the bounce. But I think they've got to recalibrate the distance management on those two. They were giving them too much space, and they were letting them get too comfortable. And De'Aaron Fox was just rhythm dribbling into mid-rangers and even the three ball where he went 4 of 8, right? I understand going under screens on him, but they're going to have to crowd him a little more, trust the back end of the defense, and make him finish all the way at the rim. They're letting him probe. The next thing you know, he's at the dotted line, and it's an easy floater, right? Again, easier said than done, but Fox, very impressive. He lived up to the hype in his playoff debut. In fact, both he and Monk did. That brings me to today's sponsor. You guessed it, So Rare NBA, a collection of cards online that you basically play fantasy basketball with. They're also an NFT collection that you keep, and you set your lineup, and their stats are how you score. We've all played fantasy before, or most of you have, right? You can compete against me in my league, or you can set your own league. You can win gift cards, tickets to games, signed jerseys. And I want to do a new thing here now in the playoffs where talk about a player whose numbers potentially could be going up and see a spike. Let's start with the Warriors-Kings game. Trey Lyles, is he going to continue to perform like that? I know he's a solid vet off the bench, but what did he have, like 4 threes? He's going to get the opportunity. I think the question is he going to be that efficient? And then how about today's game, Rui Hachimura? Huge afternoon for him. So I have him in my deck of cards. I might have to set him in the lineup next week. Anyway, link in the description, So Rare NBA. Go ahead and join my league right now. It's free. As far as the Sabonis matchup goes, listen, I know his numbers were bad. Bro still had, what do you have, 16 or 17 rebounds? And that's the point that Kerr made post-game, and he circled the rebounding battle. Not only did the Warriors lose the rebounding battle, I think it was like 51-40 or something like that, but it was the offensive rebounds. It was 17-9, Sabonis, Trey Lyles, and everyone's bigger than the Warriors, but there's a size. You saw the size on the offensive glass. Affording the number one offense second chance opportunities is not exactly a recipe to being successful in this series, right? I think the other thing was down the stretch, the shot selection, right? This is the storyline that everybody's complaining about. The Warriors, did they get into the bonus in the fourth quarter around the 8-minute mark, right? And then they proceeded to jack three-pointer after three-pointer. And you're hearing, the Kings went into a box and won. I don't know about that, right? It kind of caused a little confusion. It was maybe a little, it was confusion, but it wasn't that effective. And the bottom line is Klay had the ball in his hands too much down the stretch of the game, and we know what he's capable of, but also he wasn't hot, right? And I guess you can say, well, Klay's not hot until he gets hot. But I thought there were too many possessions in the final 5 minutes of the game where Klay had the ball in his hands. You got to set Steph up high and let him work. I don't think their box and one's going to be that effective, and I think it can be pulled apart. But they settled for too many threes. And it's funny because one of those threes goes down and we're having a different conversation today. So I understand they are ultimately going to live by it and die by it. But especially when you get in the penalty, something that the Warriors don't do. Here's what I said in today's breakdown. Again, if you want, I know you guys were waiting on this and I wanted to get this video out to you today, the day after, but some of these playoff games, you're not going to hear from me on YouTube within 24 hours because I have to do the breakdown, and it's exhausting, honestly, to emotionally revisit, especially when it's a loss. I can't imagine how the players feel, but it's tiring. But in the breakdown, one of my thoughts was, listen, because with Wigs, you get it. He's hovered around the 40% mark from the three-point line all season long, and he has it's a tougher decision for him whether to shoot it or get downhill. But when you look at GP2 and you look at Kuminga in particular in this series, I'm not sure they have to take a three. When you consider Sacramento just doesn't have rim protection, just get downhill and attack the basket. So I would mandate those two to just drive off those weak side kicks and put pressure on the rim. And the other aspect of that would help so much is you saw the pace and how quick Sacramento was scoring late in that game, even off mades. And I think one way to slow that pace down would be to get to the line. It's harder to run off of free throws, right? But the positive, you have to admit, Wiggins looked good. You'll live with that three to win the game every time, right? And he kind of cooled off at the end. But all in all, he had fresh legs. I thought you did see a little bit of timing issues. There were some times where he just wasn't ready to defend, and one of those two guards went right by him. But all in all, he looks good. And I think more importantly, mentally he looks good, right? Because there's still an element of unknown as far as where Andrew Wiggins has been, right? And so it's like, where is he at mentally? And I thought that beyond the physical, which we kind of knew what type of dude he is and how he would bounce back, mentally he looked engaged and confident. And I think that bodes very well in the series moving forward. But the truth of the matter is, these three guard lineups with Dante, Poole, Steph, and GP2 and all that, we got outsized. And you know where I'm going with this. Jonathan Kuminga played 10 minutes in that opening game. He had 8 points, and he is the biggest vertical spacer? Is that a word? Vertical spacer, and he has the ability to put the most pressure on the rim. I guess Poole, in that sense, could do that too, but he settled for too many threes. And so I think that they've got to find a way to get Kuminga closer to 20 minutes instead of 10 and just tell him, hey, no threes in this one. Just get downhill and try to make a poster every time. Right? Slow the game down, get to the line. We know how susceptible the Kings are to foul trouble, right? And that's another thing. If Malik Monk is going to have himself a big series and they're going to go with Monk over Herter in the series, the one thing about Malik is he's undisciplined defensively. He is susceptible to fouls, much like Sabonis. And so they've got to attack that matchup on the other end and maybe back him off and cool him off by making him play more defense. And the true way to do that is to get downhill and at the rim. It's not only does shooting bad shots allow them to get out and run, it also lets them rest defensively, right? If we're going to settle for the three, if you're a defender and all they're taking is threes, right? It's just less taxing on you. And so all in all, listen, I don't really feel any different about the series than I did before it began, but it's a tough one because I feel like we've been saying this all year long, right? It was a game they could have had on the road, and to steal that game one, it would have been a big deal. That said, it was a more important win for the Kings than it was a bad loss for the Warriors when you look at the entirety of the series in the context. But yeah, I'm curious to see eventually when it gets back to San Francisco what that crowd is like. I will make note that you heard that E40 was thrown out of there late in that game, and he was, that may be a mistake. That may be a mistake. I know that sounds kind of silly, but to fire up, basically Sacramento. I know you have taunted and upset one of the most beloved Bay Area figures that there is in E40. And let's just keep an eye on it. It could backfire. We'll see. I know that the game has to be played on the court, but that was interesting. What else? I guess let's talk a little bit about this Lakers-Memphis matchup because I'm fresh off catching the end of that game. And, again, Rui Hachimura going off. And the Lakers, they just put their foot on Memphis's neck late in that game. And then you just saw Ja, man. You saw Ja. You've been watching the league long enough. It's like you've seen this story before, right? And as spectacular as Ja Morant is, enjoy it while it lasts. Now, I'm not here to say that this was a catastrophic injury, but it looked bad to his shooting hand. And he's durable. He's tough. He's a freak of nature, athletically and physically. So, hey, he might just tape it up and play the rest of the series. I'm not saying he can't, but this is going to be who Ja Morant is throughout his career. He's going to constantly be having to battle injury because of his playing style, right? Because of his playing style. It's very similar to Anthony Davis. And Anthony Davis, it's really a defensive thing. And AD's spatial awareness, AD, I think you can accuse of being maybe clumsy, right? AD is like the clumsiest, best athlete you've ever seen, right? But AD puts himself in a lot of compromising positions defensively, contesting shots, and Ja puts himself in a ton of compromising positions, attacking the rim. You saw him go down, the hand folded. The Lakers run away with it, and now they're up 1-0 and have stolen home court advantage. And so I'm not saying we saw the Ja injury coming, but I think a lot of us saw the Lakers maybe pouncing on this Memphis team that is more vulnerable than it was a year ago. And I guess what I will say is I'm impressed with Jaren Jackson Jr. I'm impressed with Jaren Jackson Jr. because it looks like he's taking a step here that I wasn't sure he was going to take on the offensive end. He looks like he perhaps can be a go-to guy offensively, doing it against AD in that Lakers front line, guarding LeBron. Like this, the silver lining for Memphis may be in this series if they don't have Ja is Jaren Jackson announcing himself as a true guy in this league. But we know how gritty Memphis is. It doesn't matter who's in or out of their lineup. They're going to put up a fight, and it's going to be a fight. But how about Hillbilly Kobe, though? Austin Reeves, man. And it's funny because, hey, let's be real about this. The hate that he was receiving was racism. Right? You heard a lot like that. You heard a lot of players being like, yo, why is he getting so much hype and blah, 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 because he's white? Like, I think he was getting hate because he was white, right? But the truth is he was getting hype because he's a Laker, right? And then the Hillbilly Kobe nickname, it's so fitting because don't get me wrong, right? There's levels to this, right? And there's many levels between them, but he is in the same mold of Kobe in the sense of he's a guy where it's like he can do everything. Right? He can do it. Did you see the behind the back pass out to Hachimura for a three from under the basket on a rope? The slow down bumper car floater, like the dude has a complete package. And you look at this Lakers team right now, and they're finally what they had kind of planned to be in these twilight years of LeBron, where LeBron doesn't have to carry too much of the load now. He can be the third, fourth guy at times and kind of play more of like a Chris Paul role where he just sets the table, distributes, picks his spots, and can pace himself better. And so again, I'm not counting out Memphis or Ja with how tough they are, but the first blow has been struck and the Lakers have to be feeling good about their chances. So now we got, I'm looking forward to this. I'm not going to watch Milwaukee, Miami, but I am looking forward to this Suns Clippers matchup. And then game 2 in Sacramento. Let me ask y'all this, Dub Nation. Is this a must win? Is this a must win? The Warriors certainly won't say that because that's just going to put pressure on themselves. But how do you guys feel about that? If I had to guess, I would say the majority of you would say no because of the history of this team and how resilient and how magical they've been in this dynasty run. They're like, no. What's the saying? A series doesn't start till someone wins on the road. So you could always lean on that. But to me, if you got to win one in SAC, 2 seems a lot better than 7. We'll see. I'll be back with more breakdowns and takes as these playoffs keep on rolling. As always, hit that like, share, and subscribe. I'm out, y'all.